Captain James Walker sat at the metal table and nervously tapped his fingers on the cold surface. He'd like to be anywhere else right now. He'd rather be cleaning plasma residue off the engine cores of his ship than sitting in this room. The diplomatic chamber on Unity Station was designed to look impressive with its glass walls and polished steel beams. Big windows let you see the stars going on and on. It should have felt great, but right now it felt like being stuck in a fancy prison cell. There were two creatures across the table from him that made every hair on his body stand on end, but for very different reasons. The Veshtari ambassador sat to his left. It looked like someone had carved a person out of crystal and then brought it to life. It had a heartbeat-like pulse of light inside it, and its surface was covered in facets and angles that caught the starlight and threw it around the room in rainbow patterns. James could hear a soft humming sound like running your finger around the edge of a wine glass when it moved. His brain kept telling him that something on his right was a dragon, even though dragons weren't real. But it was there anyway. The creature was so big that it barely fit in the chair that had been made just for it. There were scales all over its body, and they changed color from deep emerald green to midnight black depending on how the light hit them. Its eyes were the color of melted gold, and its pupils were vertical slits that followed every little move James made. He could smell sulfur every time it breathed, like being too close to a matchbook that had just been lit. They had been fighting for 3 hours straight and James was going crazy. The collective owns the mining rights to Sector 7 Alpha, the crystal creature said, its voice sounding like someone playing a glass bottle musical instrument. The treaty signed in the year, your treaty is worthless, the dragon said, its voice so deep that James felt it in his chest. A thin stream of smoke came out of its nose. My people built homes there 200 years before your collective even existed. We were the first ones there. That means it's ours. James fought the urge to hit his head against the table. He flew planes that carried cargo. He moved containers of freeze-dried food and mining tools from one side of known space to the other. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't ready for this. He didn't use fancy political language or know about the long history between these two species. But here he was anyway because his ship had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was sailing through what he thought was empty space when a Veshtari patrol ship started shooting at a Skarzen mining ship. James had seen everything and recorded it on his ship's cameras without even thinking about it. Now both sides wanted him to tell his side of the story, and neither would accept anything less than full proof that they were right. The crystal rang again, starting another long explanation about how things have been done in the past and what the law says. The dragon growled low in its throat, clearly getting ready to argue again. James could feel the pressure building behind his eyes, which was the start of a headache that would be very bad. He began to twist the ring on his right hand without even thinking about it. He did it all the time when he was stressed or anxious. The ring was a simple silver band that had become smooth and thin after being worn for decades. It didn't have any stones, engravings, or anything else fancy. James could remember that his mom had worn it every day. In the last few weeks, when she got really sick, she took it off her finger and pressed it into his hand. She told him to keep it safe and think of her when he saw it. He had worn it ever since, and the cool metal against his skin made him feel better. Both aliens stopped talking in the middle of a sentence when his fingers touched the ring. The silence felt like a physical force. 1 second the room was full of people arguing, and the next there was nothing. There was complete and total silence. James looked up, not sure what to think, and saw both creatures staring at him with such intensity that it made his stomach drop. The Veshtari's inner light was flickering quickly, like a broken neon sign that turned on and off. The dragon was completely still, not even breathing. This was somehow scarier than when it had been growling and smoking. Where? The crystal being whispered, and its voice, which was once musical, got small and shaky. Where did you get that? James looked at his hand, where a plain silver ring was on his finger. He looked back up at the two aliens and didn't know what to do. Get what? This. He raised his hand. It's just a ring. My mom gave it to me. Before she died, she gave it to me. What? What's the matter? The dragon's scales began to change color. James had read in the cultural briefing packet that Skarzen scales changed color depending on how they were feeling. James could see that the creature's scales were rippling through every color he could think of and a few he couldn't. Bright red, deep purple, and electric blue flowed over its body like oil on water. The briefing said that meant very high levels of emotional distress. Surprise. Maybe fear. The dragon slowly leaned forward, bringing its huge head closer to James. He could feel the heat coming off its scales and see his own reflection in its molten gold eyes. The dragon said, "That's impossible," and its voice was barely above a whisper. James's hand still shook as the sound of it rumbled. What can't be done? James asked, pulling his hand back to protect it. It's just a ring my mom wore. What is the big deal? James had to squint because the Veshtari's light was so bright. Human, that isn't just anything. Do you know what you're wearing? James snapped back, apparently not, feeling his temper rise. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or are we just going to sit here and stare at each other? James could tell that the dragon and the crystal were talking about something important, even though they were two very different types of creatures that lived in very different ways. At last the dragon spoke. That ring you have on your finger. We know what it is. We know what it can do. We don't know how a person got one, and we can't understand how they did. James pulled his hand back without even thinking about it, wrapping his fingers around the ring to protect it. He felt a strong urge to protect it and keep it safe. What are you saying? It's only a ring. My mom wore this piece of jewelry. The Veshtari's light was so bright that James had to raise his other hand to shield his eyes. He could see the bright light even through his eyelids. The crystal creature was vibrating and making a sound like breaking glass when he could finally look again. Listen to me very carefully, human. That isn't just anything. That is a bond that will last forever. James blinked at it, not knowing what to do. A what? What the heck is an eternal bond? The dragon moved in its chair, and all of a sudden that huge reptilian head was right in front of James. He could see every single scale and the tiny differences in color. The creature's breath was hot and smelled like smoke and something else, something old. 5 million years ago, the dragon said, its voice dropping into what sounded like a storytelling tone, there was a civilization that ruled this whole galaxy. It was before your species had even climbed down from the trees or learned how to use fire, tools, or language. We refer to them as the architects. No one knows what they called themselves. They made amazing things that we still can't copy. They understood the world in ways that we are still trying to figure out. The dragon stopped for a moment to let that sink in. James's heart raced in his chest. They fell as all civilizations do, the dragon said. War, disease, pride, no one knows for sure. But they vanished, leaving behind ruins on 1,000 worlds and artifacts spread out across space. Artifacts of power that can't be explained. One huge claw, with each talon as long as James's forearm, slowly reached out and pointed straight at the ring on his finger. That's one of them. James felt like someone had poured ice water down his back. You're crazy. You are completely crazy. My mom wore this to the store. She wore it while she was working in the backyard garden and getting dirt under her nails. She wore it to meetings with her parents and teachers and to the doctor. She just liked the ring. When she spoke while wearing it, the Veshtari cut in, its voice now urgent and almost desperate. Did her words mean anything? Think about it, person. Did she promise things and never break them? Did truth seem to follow her around like a shadow? Did people trust her in ways that were strange? James opened his mouth to argue, to tell them they were crazy and that they were reading too much into a simple piece of jewelry. But the words died in his throat. His mother is Rebecca Walker, but her friends call her Becca. People in their small town knew her for being honest. People used to say that you could trust Becca Walker when she said something. They said she was the most truthful person they had ever met. She had worn that ring every day of the 43 years she was married to his father. She put it on the morning of her wedding and never took it off, not even when she had to get an MRI and the doctors told her to take off all her other jewelry. James remembered asking her when he was 7 or 8 why she never took the ring off. She smiled at him, the kind of smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle, and said, "Because when I wear this, I remember to always tell the truth, especially to the people I love." He thought it was just a nice thing to say. "Scan it," the dragon said, breaking through his thoughts. "We need to scan it. Right now. We need to be 100% sure." James was standing in a lab that looked like something out of a science fiction movie 20 minutes later. There were machines all around him that made sounds he couldn't even begin to name. Holographic screens showed data that scrolled in languages and symbols he didn't know. The technician who was in charge of the equipment was a little gray creature about half the height of James. It had 6 arms that moved independently of each other, and each one controlled a different panel. James put the ring on a white platform in the middle of the room. The silver band was lit up by beams of light, some of which he could see and some of which he could only feel. The machines made a louder humming sound with the pitch going up and down in waves. The technician's 6 arms suddenly stopped moving. James didn't think it was possible, but the creature's big black eyes got even bigger. It looked at the dragon and the Veshtari, and even though its face was strange and hard to read, James could see that it was scared. The technician said, "Quantum binding field," and their voice shook. "Yes, it is active. It really is active." More screens came to life. Temporal lock signature confirmed. The structure of molecules? The creature stopped talking and kept checking and rechecking its readings. The molecular structure of the museum artifacts is the same as that of the other objects, even at the atomic level. The Veshtari went completely black. The light inside its crystal body completely disappeared, making it look like a statue made of black glass. The dragon threw its huge head back and roared. The sound was so loud and deep that James could feel it in his bones. The station's walls shook. An alarm went off somewhere down the hall. "It's real," the technician whispered, staring at the ring as if it were going to blow up at any moment. "It's real though. I thought they were stories. I thought the stories were too big. But it's real." James's hands were shaking. He put them in his pockets to hide them. "How many of these things are there?" he asked in a low voice. "3, the dragon said, its voice still echoing in the room. 3 in the whole galaxy. We have one locked up in the Veshtari Imperial Museum on their homeworld. To open it, the entire ruling council must give their permission. Our most elite warriors guard one in our sacred vault on Skarzen Prime day and night. And there's one in the collector's archive on Terminus. It's owned by a creature so old that no one knows what kind of creature it is." The dragon's golden eyes were on James. "They're old things. They are worth more than anything else." "4, the Veshtari said softly, and the light started to come back. "Looks like there are 4. The dragon looked back at James with those piercing golden eyes, and the weight of that gaze made him want to step back. "When you wear that ring and talk," the dragon said slowly and carefully as if it were explaining something to a child, "reality itself binds to your words. Do you know what that means? You can't break an oath you made while touching that thing. Not will be broken. No. The universe itself makes it happen. A promise turns into a law of nature. A treaty is final. If 2 leaders wore these rings and promised peace between their people, there would be no way for them to go to war." James looked down at the plain silver ring on the white platform. His mom wore that to his Little League games. She had it on while she helped him with his math homework. She had worn it while making pancakes on Sunday mornings. "How the hell did my mother get this?" he asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "Put it on," the Veshtari said, and there was a tone in its voice that sounded like it was begging. The light inside its crystal body was beating faster, like a heart beating faster. "Put on the ring and say a simple sentence. 1 sentence. We'll keep an eye on the quantum field and see what happens." James looked at the ring that was on the white platform. He wanted to say no and run away with the thing as fast and as far as he could. But he also knew he had to do this because he had grown up hearing his mother say that running away from the truth never helped. He needed to know. His hand shook a little as he reached out to grab the ring. The metal felt warm to the touch, even though it had only been sitting under laboratory lights. He thought about it for a second before putting it on his finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. It had always been there, ever since his mother put it in his hand 5 years ago in the hospital. But that didn't make sense, did it? His mother was 5 feet 10 inches tall and had long fingers and wide hands from working in labs and gardens for a long time. James was about the same height as her, but his hands were smaller than hers. The ring shouldn't fit him the same way it fit her. But it did. It fit perfectly on his finger like it had been made just for him. The metal felt good and familiar against his skin. That should have been his first sign that something was very, very wrong. Or very, very wrong. He didn't know which one. "What do I say?" James looked up at the dragon and the Veshtari and asked, "What?" The 6-armed technician was frantically changing controls, bringing up more displays, and placing sensors that looked like floating silver spheres around James's head. "Anything," the dragon said. "Just a simple truth. Something simple. Your name, your age, and anything else that is true." James took a deep breath. He felt silly standing in a strange lab about to make a simple statement that sounded like a big announcement. But everyone was staring at him so hard that he couldn't make a joke about it. "My name is James Walker," he said clearly, making sure his voice didn't shake. "I'm 34 years old. I am the captain of the cargo ship Frontier." The effect was quick and big. All the instruments in the room started to scream. Not exactly, but close enough. Alarms went off. Displays blinked and flashed. The silver spheres that were floating around James's head spun wildly in circles. The technician with 6 arms jumped back from the control panel as if it had caught fire, and all 6 of his hands flew up in what had to be some kind of defensive gesture. "What's going on?" James yelled over the noise and instinctively reached for the ring to pull it off. The Veshtari's voice cut through the noise and said, "Don't move. Don't touch anything. Technician, give me a report." The little gray thing was frantically working its controls, and its black eyes were darting between a dozen different screens. Reality Cascade confirmed, it stammered, its voice high and scared. His words? They left a mark on space-time itself. The facts he just said are now set in stone within a 3-meter radius. You can't change them. You can't argue with them. They're stuck in the fabric of reality. James's stomach dropped. What does that mean? The dragon leaned forward and spoke slowly. That means that the universe knows your name is James Walker within 3 meters of where you are right now. It knows that you are 34 years old. It knows that you drive a ship called the Frontier. Those aren't just facts anymore. They are basic parts of reality that can't be changed, just like the laws of physics. Give it a try, the Veshtari said, its light flashing quickly. Promise me. Something easy. James felt like ice water was running through his veins. I don't think I want to. Please, the dragon said, and James turned to look at it. The big animal looked scared. Worried, in fact. We need to know if it works for your kind the same way it worked for the architects. James had a hard time swallowing. His throat was dry. He started with, I promise to, but then he had to stop and think. What promise could he make that wouldn't ruin his life? I promise to let you know what I learn about this ring. About where it came from. James felt it the moment the last word came out of his mouth. It felt like someone had put a heavy weight on his shoulders, but it wasn't on the outside. It was inside him, settling deep into his bones, wrapping around his heart, lungs, and every other part of him. It wasn't exactly painful, but it was there. No doubt about it. You can't ignore it. He could feel it there, solid and real, like a stone that had been placed in his chest that he'd have to carry around forever. Oh God, he said. Oh my God, what did I just do? The binding took, the Veshtari said softly, and the light had dimmed to a soft glow. You can't go back on that promise now. Not even if you tried. Not if you wanted to more than anything else in the world. James pulled the ring off his finger with shaking hands, hoping that taking it off would make the feeling go away. It didn't. The weight stayed where it was, heavy and permanent. It doesn't matter if you wear it anymore, the dragon said, its voice softening to almost a sympathetic tone. The oath is sealed. When you make a promise while wearing an eternal bond, that's it. It's over. You will tell us what you find out about that ring, or reality will make you do it. You might try to stay quiet, but you might end up talking anyway. You could try to run and find every way back to us. The universe doesn't like it when you break promises made with these things. It makes them follow through. The dragon stopped for a moment to let James think about that. That's what the eternal bonds can do. That's why the 3 known rings are kept in the safest places in the galaxy. That's why people have fought over them. That's why they scare us. James looked at the ring in his hand. It seems so innocent and easy. A silver band that has been worn down over time. He said in a hoarse voice, my mom wore this every day. For 43 years. Every single day. Then every word she spoke while wearing it was bound to truth, the Veshtari said softly. She never broke a promise. Every promise she made became a law of the universe that was written into the very fabric of reality. James thought about his mom, Rebecca Walker. She had worked as a research scientist in a government lab, where she studied changes in the atmosphere and climate patterns. She was quiet and careful, the type of person who cut once and measured twice. She was kind and always made time to help her neighbors or volunteer at the food bank. And she loved his father with a fierce, devoted love that lasted from the day they met until the day she died of cancer 5 years ago. She had always been honest with James. He couldn't remember ever doing it. Not even small lies like other parents told. When he asked her if Santa was real, she gently told him the truth. When he asked if his goldfish had gone to live on a farm, she told him in simple terms that he could understand. In the last few weeks of her life in the hospital, when he asked her if she was scared of dying, she looked him in the eye and said yes, she was scared, but she was also thankful for the life she had lived. He understood why she had never lied. She couldn't. There was only one option for her every time she wore that ring, which was every day. James looked up at the dragon and the Veshtari and said, I need to call my father. Right now. I need to talk to him about this. When James typed in his father's contact code, the communication console in the corner of the lab came to life. It rang once, 2 times. When the 3rd ring came, his father's face showed up on the holographic screen. At first it was blurry, but then it got clearer. Thomas Walker looked just like James remembered him from their last video call 2 months ago, but he looked more tired. His gray hair stuck up in strange ways, and there were lines on his cheek from sleeping on it. The man was in his late 60s now, but he was still strong and solid, like someone who had worked in construction for 40 years. James? His father said, squinting at the screen and reaching for his glasses on the nightstand. Son, it's 3 in the morning here. Is everything all right? Are you hurt? James noticed that his hands were shaking. He held on to the edge of the console to keep them steady. Hey Dad, I need to talk to you about Mom. About the ring she got. His father's face changed right away and in a big way. The sleepy confusion went away and was replaced by something else. Not quite scared but close to it. Maybe some recognition. Like he had been waiting for this call for years and didn't want it to come. Thomas sat up straighter in bed and was suddenly very awake. What's the deal with it? James asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Did she ever tell you where she got it? He could feel the dragon and the Veshtari behind him listening closely, even though they were trying to stay out of the camera's view to give him some space. There was silence on the other end of the line. James looked at his father's face and saw how his jaw tightened and how his eyes flickered to something off-screen before coming back to the camera. Why are you asking? Finally, Thomas spoke and his voice was careful and guarded. James let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but it wasn't funny. Because I'm standing in a lab on Unity Station with 2 alien diplomats who just told me that Mom's ring is a 5 million-year-old artifact with powers that can't be explained. They say it can hold reality together and make promises that can't be broken. And I really want to know how Mom got it. For a long time, Thomas didn't say anything. James saw his father's face change too quickly for him to name the emotions. Finally, the old man sighed. It sounded like someone who had been keeping a big secret for too long and was almost happy to finally let it go. Thomas started, "Your grandmother?" and rubbed his hand across his face. "Helen, I haven't talked about this in years. Your mom made me promise not to." He stopped for a moment as if he were thinking. Helen was on a research trip in 2087. This was before you were born and before your mother and I got married. Antarctica. They were taking ice core samples to look at old climate data. It was supposed to be standard scientific stuff. James's heart started to race. What happened? They found something in the ice, Thomas said in a low voice. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that shouldn't have been able to happen. It got classified faster than you can blink. The government came in and took over everything, shutting it all down. Most of the team died down there. Thomas's voice had gone flat, like when people talk about something bad and try not to feel it. The report from the government said it was an accident. Equipment breaks down when the temperature is below zero. This happens sometimes in Antarctica, right? People die. It's a risky job. James felt his blood turn cold. And what about Grandma? Your grandma made it through. There were only 3 people who got out and she was one of them. Thomas looked at his hands. She came home changed. Different. She wouldn't say what they had found down there. Not to anyone. Not to me, not to your grandfather before he died, and not even to your mother. We'd ask and she'd look at us like she was seeing something far away that scared her. After that she'd switch topics. But she had the ring, James said. But she had the ring, Thomas said, nodding. Nobody knew where it came from. It just appeared when she got back from Antarctica. She wore it for about 10 years, then on your mother's wedding day she took it off and gave it to Rebecca. His voice cracked a little when he said his wife's name. I can see it so clearly. Helen took your mother's hand and pressed the ring into her palm while we were in the church's bridal suite. Thomas had to stop and clear his throat, she said. She told him to keep it close. When you wear it, speak the truth. It'll keep your love strong. James held on to the console more tightly. That's all? That's all she said. That's all she'd say, Thomas said. Helen wouldn't say what she meant or where the ring came from when your mother asked her. They just kept telling me to wear it and tell the truth. We thought she had gone a little crazy because of what happened in Antarctica. You know, post-traumatic stress? Watching her team die like that and almost dying herself. We thought the ring was just something she had bought and attached meaning to as a way to deal with her problems. Thomas smiled, but it was sad and far away. Your mom wore it because it meant something to her mom. Helen was already sick at that point. She was in the early stages of dementia that would eventually kill her. Your mom wanted to honor her and make her happy. She wore the ring on her wedding day and then... He stopped for a moment, and his eyes got that faraway look that meant he was remembering something important. She wore it because she loved me. She wanted our marriage to last. She wanted to be the kind of wife and mother who kept her word. James looked down at the ring in his hand. It was a simple silver band that had been buried in Antarctic ice for millions of years, long before people existed. Dad, I think Grandma knew exactly what she was giving Mom. I think she knew what that ring could do. Maybe, Thomas said in a low voice, and James could tell that he was thinking about it. James, your mother never lied to me. Not in 43 years of being married. Not even the small lies that everyone tells. You know the kind I'm talking about, like, does this tie look good? And, did you remember to get milk? Are you mad at me? She never told a lie. I always thought that was just how she was. Rebecca Walker, the most honest woman in the world. James said firmly, it was who she was, because he thought it was important to say. Mom was honest because she wanted to be. The ring made it last forever. It made sure she could never change her mind even if she wanted to. Thomas nodded slowly, and James could see that his father was about to cry. Every day she wore that ring. To the grocery store, to work, and to your baseball games. For 43 years, every day. Do you get what that means? If what you're saying is true. James knew exactly what it meant. It means that every promise she made to you was kept. Every promise she made was made real. When she said, I do at your wedding, when she promised to love you through thick and thin, and when she said she'd always be there for you, he had to stop because his voice was shaking. Those weren't just words. They were the law of the universe. The mood in the diplomatic chamber had completely changed by the time James came back an hour later. The dragon and the Veshtari ambassador were no longer fighting. They weren't even looking at each other. Instead, they both turned to look at James as he walked into the room. He was beginning to understand the looks on their alien faces. Fear and hope were mixed together, as were desperation and what might have been relief. They looked like two people who were about to drown and had just seen a life preserver floating nearby but weren't sure if they could get to it. James sat down at the table with the heavy ring in his pocket. It was warm against his leg and he could feel it there like it was alive. The dragon spoke first. Its deep voice was quieter than before, almost humble. We've reached an impasse, it said, and James could hear the anger and tiredness in those words. Our people are on the edge of war. Again. This is the 5th time in 700 years. Neither of us can give in without looking weak to the people we lead. We can't trust each other to keep any promises we make. We have made deals before. They always fall apart. Your patrol fired on our mining ship, the dragon said, pointing at the Veshtari. You say it was in your area. We say that the land is ours. Both of our governments are calling for action. Our armies are both getting ready for action. Ships will start shooting at each other in 3 or 4 days. A lot of people will die. Maybe millions before it's over. The Veshtari's light blinked slowly and sadly. And we both don't want this war. But we can't stop it. Not without something that makes the peace real, lasting, and trustworthy. James looked at the ring in his hand and knew what was going to happen. You want me to be the middleman? You want me to wear this ring while we talk about it? The Veshtari said, if you wear that ring, any agreement we reach will be binding. They spoke very carefully and chose each word carefully. Not just on paper. Not only in politics. Completely binding. Even if they really wanted to, neither of our people could break it. Even if it meant staying alive. The universe itself would make sure the rules were followed. James turned the ring over in his hands and watched the light dance on the worn silver. You'd be giving up your war before it even starts. You'd have to accept peace whether you like it or not. The dragon said, we'd be choosing peace that would last, and its golden eyes were now fierce. Something that hasn't been between our people for 700 years. Do you know what it's like, person? To see your kids go to war every few generations? To see the same fights happen over and over because people don't trust each other to keep their promises? We're worn out. We both are. We are so sick of this. James thought about his mom. He imagined her wearing this ring while she made him breakfast before school, flipping pancakes and asking him about his homework. He thought about how she promised to come to his soccer games and how she had never missed one, even when she was tired from work. He thought about the pictures of her and his father renewing their vows on their 40th anniversary. They were both older and grayer, but they still looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world, and the light shone on the ring on her finger. She could shape galaxies with her hand. Power that would make civilizations fight to get it. Power that could bring down governments or build empires. She had also used it to keep her word to help her son with his algebra homework. She used it to make sure she never lied to the man she loved. She had used it to keep the little promises that made life worth living. Okay, James said in a low voice. Let's talk. It took 6 hours. 6 long, tiring, and annoying hours. James wasn't a trained diplomat. He didn't know the big words or how to do things the right way. He could listen, ask questions, and tell when someone was lying to him. He made them explain their points of view from the start. Not the official things they had been saying to each other for hours, but the real reasons. What did their people really need? What were they really scared of? What would peace look like if they could have it without losing face? He showed how both arguments were wrong. When the dragon said that there was historical evidence for ownership of Sector 7 Alpha, James pulled up star charts and asked how a civilization that had only been able to fly in space for 200 years could say they were there first when the system had been marked as disputed territory for the last 500 years. James read the actual treaty that the Veshtari used as evidence and found 3 parts that disagreed with their reading of it. He made them look at things from each other's points of view. Made the dragon tell them why the Veshtari might be scared of their mining activities. Made the Veshtari admit that the dragon's people were growing because their homeworld was running out of resources and they needed new sources of minerals and fuel to stay alive. He didn't let either side use pride or old grudges as an excuse. James stopped the dragon when it started talking about old insults and problems from the past. That was 300 years ago and everyone who was there is dead. Right now is what we're talking about. Today. What do you really need to keep your people alive and doing well? James also stopped the Veshtari when they tried to talk about honor and reputation. Your honor won't mean much if you're in charge of the ruins of your civilization. What matters more, looking tough or staying alive? An agreement slowly started to take shape, but it was hard. Both species would have equal mining rights in Sector 7 Alpha, with each having access to different resource deposits. They would set up research stations that everyone could use to learn more about the system's asteroid belt and its unique features. They would set up programs for cultural exchange so that their people could meet face-to-face instead of just seeing enemies on the battlefield. They would set up a joint council to settle disagreements before they got out of hand and turned violent. It wasn't perfect. Both sides had to give up things they wanted. Both sides thought they were giving up too much. But it was fair, it worked, and most importantly, it was something they could both live with. James took a deep breath when they finally worked out the last detail and fought over every word in the agreement until everyone was too tired to go on. He took the ring out of his pocket and put it on his finger. It fell into place as if it had been waiting for this moment. James started to read the terms out loud, making sure to speak clearly and slowly. He felt like reality was changing around him as he spoke. The air felt heavier and thicker, as if the room's space was being pushed together and changed. The weight he felt before, when he promised to tell them about the ring, was nothing compared to this. This was huge. This was very important. This was the universe itself paying attention and writing things down. He felt the world shake and lock into place when he finished the last clause and said the last words that would keep both civilizations at peace. The treaty was no longer just words on paper. It was a part of life itself, as unchanging and permanent as gravity or the speed of light. The dragon bowed its huge head, which showed how much it respected the person. You could have used that power for yourself, it said in a low voice. Humans are new to the galactic stage. You're only 100 years into space travel. You could have made requests. You could have used our desperation to get land, resources, and political power. You could have made this deal work for your species more than any other. James looked at the ring on his finger. He said simply, "My mom used it to keep her marriage vows." That sounded like a better plan. James was learning to recognize the Veshtari's light pulsing in a way that sounded like laughter. Humans scare us, your species. You find things that are very powerful and use them for love. You can have an impact on the universe and choose peace for people you don't know. You could change the whole galaxy, but instead you choose to help 2 civilizations you don't know very well not kill each other. Is that really that strange? James asked. To the rest of the galaxy? The dragon's scales changed color in a rainbow of colors, and its voice sounded like it was either laughing or being amazed. Yes. That is very, very odd. Most species would think of this ring as a weapon or a way to control others. You see it as a way to keep your word to people you care about. James took the ring off his finger and held it up to the light to look at it one last time. The ring belonged to his mother. His grandmother found it in the ice of Antarctica. An object that is older than human civilization and most of the species in the known galaxy. A piece of the architect's work, whoever they were. I'm keeping this, he said firmly, looking at both aliens. And I'm going to use it like Mom did. For real. For keeping your word. For the little things in life that really matter. Not for games of power or politics. Just for being honest and keeping my word. Then the galaxy, the Veshtari said in a quiet voice, its light glowing softly and steadily, has just become a much more interesting place.